The auction hall buzzed with the metallic chatter of a dozen alien species, but Queen Lyra's attention fixed on cage 847. Inside, a massive feline creature with silver-streaked fur pressed against the energy bars, its amber eyes dull with defeat. The auctioneer's voice crackled through her translator. Carvani Warcat, veteran of the Helix campaigns. Bidding starts at 5,000 credits. Lyra's royal guard flanked her in perfect formation, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks. This wasn't supposed to be a rescue mission. Earth's new queen had come to the Nexus station to observe galactic commerce, to understand the markets that would shape humanity's future among the stars. But seeing sentient beings sold like cargo made her stomach turn. "Your Majesty," Captain Torres whispered. "The scheduled tour continues in 15 minutes. She nodded but didn't move. The war cat's scarred muzzle bore the geometric tattoos of a decorated soldier. How had a veteran ended up in chains? 6,000, called a Zelganthi merchant. 7, countered a mining corporation representative. The cat's ears flattened. Whether it understood the bidding or simply felt the hostile energy, Lyra couldn't tell. But something in its posture, resigned, hollow, reminded her of human soldiers she'd visited in veteran centers back on Earth. 8,000 credits! The voice came from directly below the royal viewing platform. Lyra leaned forward. A human girl, maybe 16, stood among the crowd. Her clothes marked her as a station worker. Coveralls patched and repatched, boots worn thin at the heels, but she held herself straight, chin raised in defiance of the towering aliens around her. "Miss," the auctioneer's mechanical voice translated with obvious condescension, "please verify your credit authorization." The girl's hands shook as she activated a small device. Numbers flickered on the display screens around the hall. 8,247 credits, everything she had. "Valid," the auctioneer announced, though its tone suggested surprise. 8,000 going once. A Carathian delegate gestured lazily. 10,000. The girl's face crumpled. She'd been outbid by someone treating the auction like a casual purchase. Lyra watched the hope drain from the teenager's eyes, watched her shoulders slump in defeat that matched the war cat's own resignation. 15,000, Lyra said quietly. The hall fell silent. Every head turned toward the royal platform. Captain Torres stepped closer, his body language screaming disapproval even through the ceremonial armor. "Your Majesty?" the auctioneer stammered. "You heard correctly. 15,000 credits for the Carvani veteran." The Carathian delegate's multiple eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. 20,000. Lyra felt her guard's tension spike. This wasn't just about money anymore. Earth's queen was being challenged in front of representatives from a dozen worlds. Every credit she spent here would be analyzed, dissected, used to measure human resolve or weakness. But the girl below had risked everything for a creature she'd never met. Could Earth's queen do less? 50,000, Lyra said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Carathian delegate's eye stalks writhed in agitation, but it remained silent. 50,000 was real money, even for a delegation with mining rights across 3 systems. 50,000 going once, going twice, sold to Her Majesty Queen Lyra of Earth. The energy cage deactivated with a soft chime. The war cat lifted its massive head, amber eyes searching the crowd until they found Lyra on the platform above. For a moment that stretched like eternity, human and alien regarded each other across species in space. Then the cat's lips pulled back, revealing fangs longer than Lyra's fingers. But the expression wasn't a snarl. It was a smile. Recognition passed between them. Soldier to soldier, Captain Torres leaned close. "Your Majesty, protocol suggests." "Protocol can wait." Lyra descended from the platform, her guard formation flowing around her like water. The crowd parted before Earth's queen, but she wasn't moving toward the transaction desk. She stopped before the human girl, who stared up with wide eyes wet with tears. "What's your name?" Lyra asked. "Sarah Chen, Your Majesty. I work in Hydroponics Bay 7. The words tumbled out in a rush. "I didn't mean to interfere with your... I just couldn't let them. He saved my father's unit during the Helix Wars and..." "Breathe," Lyra said gently. You did nothing wrong. Behind them, the war cat padded closer on silent paws. Its massive frame could have crushed either human without effort, but it approached with the careful grace of someone accustomed to being around smaller, more fragile beings. Sarah turned, and the alien soldier lowered its great head until she could touch the silver-streaked muzzle. "Hello, Thakkar," she whispered. "I promised I'd find you." The war cat closed its eyes and purred, a sound like distant thunder. Lyra felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't about galactic politics or trade negotiations. This was about honor and keeping faith with those who'd bled for strangers. In that moment, watching a human child comfort an alien veteran, she understood something fundamental about the species she'd been born to lead. The auctioneer approached nervously. "Your Majesty, if you could complete the transaction." "Change of plans," Lyra said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I'm buying everything." The main auction hall transformed into chaos within minutes. Queen Lyra's declaration sent shockwaves through the crowd as representatives from dozens of worlds tried to understand what everything meant. The station's chief administrator, a six-armed Valdorian named Kess, materialized beside the auction platform with undisguised panic in all 12 of its eyes. "Your Majesty," Kess chittered through its translator. "When you say everything, every sentient being in every cage," Lyra clarified. "Name your price." Sarah Chen stood frozen beside the war cat Thakkar, her hand still resting on his massive head. The alien veteran's amber eyes tracked the swirling activity around them with military precision, cataloging threats and exits, but his posture remained relaxed beside the human girl who tried to save him. Captain Torres activated his private comm channel. "Majesty, Earth's treasury cannot use my personal inheritance." Lyra cut him off. "All of it." The captain's helmet turned toward her sharply. The royal inheritance comprised the accumulated wealth of 3 generations, enough to fund a colony ship or purchase a small moon. "Your Majesty, that sum represents your entire—" "I'm aware." Administrator Kess's limbs fluttered in agitation. "The total value, 67 cages. Current bidding rates, approximately 800,000 credits." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was a fortune, but not an impossible sum for Earth's monarch. What made the delegates uneasy was the precedent. If humans were willing to bankrupt their queen to buy slaves, what did that say about their long-term stability? Their judgment? "Condition accepted," Lyra said. "Release them all. Some of these beings are dangerous," Kess warned. "War criminals, pirates, failed experiments. Release them," Lyra repeated, with ice in her voice. Sarah looked up at the Queen with something approaching awe. "Your Majesty, you don't have to. I only needed to save Thakkar. My father told me about him before he died. How Thakkar carried wounded humans to safety when their transport crashed. How he stayed with them for 3 days, hunting for them, keeping them alive until rescue came." Thakkar's purr deepened at the girl's words. His massive paw touched her shoulder with impossible gentleness. Across the hall, energy cages began deactivating one by one. A Rosarian female with cybernetic implants where her wings should have been. 3 Korathian younglings huddled together in terror. A scarred human man who couldn't be more than 25. A crystalline being that pulsed with inner light. Each cage that opened revealed another story of loss, another life reduced to commodity. Some of the freed beings collapsed to their knees, others backed against walls, eyes wild with disbelief. A few simply stood motionless, as if freedom was too large a concept to process. "Your Majesty," a new voice interrupted. Lyra turned to see Ambassador Vex of the Hegemony approaching, his reptilian features arranged in diplomatic neutrality. "This display is interesting. But surely you don't intend to simply release these individuals without screening, without determining their crimes?" Lyra felt her guard tense around her. Vex represented 12 worlds that still practiced various forms of bondage. If Earth's queen publicly condemned the slave trade, she'd be making enemies before humanity even found its footing among the stars. "I intend to offer them a choice," she said carefully. "And that choice would be transportation to any world that will accept them, or," she paused, feeling the weight of history in her words. Transit to Earth, with full protection under human law. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Sarah Chen's eyes widened. Even Thakkar's ears perked forward at the translation. Ambassador Vex's tongue flicked across his lips. Your Majesty surely realizes that several of these beings are wanted for serious crimes. You would harbor fugitives? I would harbor persons denied due process, Lyra corrected. Anyone sold at auction was denied trial, denied legal representation, denied basic rights. Under human law, that makes their conviction void. More murmurs swept through the crowd, but these carried a different tone. Fear. Calculation. If humans were willing to grant asylum to anyone sold into bondage, it would destabilize the entire system. Your Majesty, Captain Torres said quietly, you're starting a war. No, Lyra replied, watching a young Zilganthi male help an elderly Korathian female to her feet. I'm ending one. Administrator Kess approached with a datapad. The financial transfer is complete. All 67 individuals are now your legal property under Galactic law. Then I hereby grant them all full freedom, Lyra announced to the hall. Effective immediately. The freed beings began to move toward her, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. They formed a rough circle around the human queen who'd bought their lives, their faces showing wonder, gratitude, and hope. Sarah Chen stepped forward, Thakkar padding beside her like a faithful guardian. Your Majesty, she said, her voice stronger now. My father always said that honor wasn't about following orders. It was about doing what's right, even when it costs everything. Lyra smiled. Your father was a wise man. He'd want me to serve, Sarah continued. If you'll have me, I volunteer for whatever comes next. Around the circle, other voices joined hers. The scarred human soldier, the Rosarian with broken wings, even some of the aliens whose species Lyra couldn't identify. They offered their skills, their loyalty, their lives to the queen who'd given them freedom. Ambassador Vex watched this display with growing unease. Your Majesty, you realize what you've done here today will have consequences across known space. Yes, Lyra said, placing her hand on Sarah's shoulder while Thakkar pressed against her other side. I certainly hope so. The transport bay of Nexus Station buzzed with controlled chaos as 67 former slaves prepared for departure. Queen Lyra had chartered 3 vessels, one bound for various Alliance worlds where some of the freed beings had family, one heading to neutral territories, and one massive passenger ship destined for Earth. 43 souls had chosen to accompany their liberator home. Sarah Chen stood beside Thakkar near the earthbound vessel's loading ramp, checking and rechecking her small bag of possessions. The War Cat wore a new collar, not the control device he'd arrived in, but a simple band of woven metal that marked him as a free being under Galactic law. You nervous? Queen Lyra observed, approaching them with Captain Torres and her guard. I've never left the station, Sarah admitted. Born here, raised here, worked here. My whole world was Hydroponics Base 7 in the markets. Thakkar rumbled something in his native language that Sarah's translator rendered as, courage grows in new soil. The Queen smiled. Wise words from an old soldier. Captain Torres checked his chronometer. Your Majesty, the hegemony delegation has requested a final audience before departure. Lyra nodded grimly. She'd been expecting this. Ambassador Vex wouldn't let her leave without one last attempt at diplomatic pressure. The delegation waited in the station's formal meeting chamber, 5 species represented by their most intimidating diplomats. Ambassador Vex stood at their head, his reptilian features more severe than before. Your Majesty, he began without preamble, the Hegemony Council has reviewed your actions. What you've done here threatens economic stability across 12 sectors. What I've done here, Lyra replied evenly, is purchase property and freed it. Perfectly legal under Galactic commerce law. Legal? Yes. But the precedent, if every minor species begins disrupting established labor markets, you mean slave markets? Vex's tongue flicked irritably. Call it what you will. The system exists for a reason. Many of these beings cannot survive in normal society. They require structured environments. Prisons, you mean. Direction, Vex corrected. Purpose. Without proper oversight, they become dangerous. Lyra felt something cold settle in her chest. And you determine who requires this oversight? Experience does. These beings were sold for legitimate reasons. Debt, crime, social instability. You're creating chaos by interfering. Behind the diplomatic language, the threat was clear. Continue this path, and humanity would find itself isolated, cut off from the trade networks that kept Earth's new colonies supplied. Captain Torres stepped closer to his queen, a subtle reminder that she wasn't alone. Around the chamber, her entire guard had arranged themselves with professional precision. Not threatening, but ready. Ambassador Vex, Lyra said quietly. May I share something my predecessor taught me? The reptilian diplomat inclined his head. She said that power is not measured by what you can take, but by what you can give away and still remain strong. Lyra moved toward the chamber's central display, which showed real-time shipping data across known space. 43 beings chose to trust me with their lives. A 16-year-old girl chose to spend everything she had to save a soldier she'd never met. That tells me more about strength than all your trade agreements. Idealism, Vex hissed. You'll learn better when your colonies start going hungry, because shipping lanes close to human vessels. The thread hung in the air like a blade. Lyra felt her guard's tension spike, felt the weight of species survival settling on her shoulders. Then Sarah Chen's voice cut through the silence from the chamber's entrance. Your Majesty? Everyone turned. The girl stood in the doorway, still small and worn in her patched coveralls, but something had changed. Thakkar flanked her like a mountain given life, and behind them stood the 43 former slaves who'd chosen Earth. The scarred human soldier, the Rhizarian with broken wings, the crystalline being that pulsed with gentle light, aliens whose species Lyra couldn't name, but whose determination she could feel. They'd come looking for their queen, and found her facing down the powers that had once owned them. You should not be here, Vex said dismissively. This is a diplomatic matter. No, Sarah interrupted, and her voice carried an edge that made every being in the room take notice. This is about us, and we have something to say. She stepped forward, Thakkar's massive presence lending her courage. Ambassador, you said we can't survive in normal society, that we need structure, direction, oversight. She gestured to the beings behind her. Look around. We're not chaos. We're a crew. The scarred soldier spoke next. I was sold to pay debts my family never owed. Paperwork errors that no one bothered to check. The Rosarian female opened damaged wing joints with a soft whir of servos. My flying permit was revoked after an accident. Suddenly I was unemployable, then homeless, then property. Bureaucratic mistakes, economic downturns, legal systems that criminalized poverty then sold the criminals to the highest bidder. These are not the hardened criminals you described, Lyra said to Vex. These are people whose lives were stolen by systems designed to create slaves, not justice. Ambassador Vex's composure cracked slightly. Even if that's true, you cannot simply. We volunteer, Sarah said firmly. All of us. For whatever Earth needs. Defense, exploration, construction, research. We know what it means to lose everything. We won't let that happen to the ones who saved us. Thakkar stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing even the largest diplomatic guards. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of a lifetime of battles. I have served many causes. Most were lies wrapped in flags. But honor recognizes honor. His amber eyes fixed on Lyra. This queen does not ask for service. She offers choice. That is why we follow. The chamber fell silent, except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Lyra felt something fundamental shift in the room's dynamics. These weren't refugees begging for sanctuary. They were volunteers offering their strength to a cause they believed in. Ambassador, she said finally, you're absolutely right about one thing. What happened here today will change everything. Because 43 beings just chose freedom over security, hope over certainty. They chose to bet their lives on the belief that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. She turned toward the chamber's exit, her guard flowing around her. If that threatens your economic stability, perhaps your economy needs threatening. As they reached the doorway, Vex called out, "Your Majesty, the Hegemony Council will remember this." Lyra paused without turning back. "Good. So will we." The passenger ship New Dawn slipped away from Nexus Station with minimal fanfare, but Queen Lyra suspected their departure was being tracked by every intelligence service in the sector. She stood in the main observation lounge, watching the stars wheel past, while behind her the most unusual crew ever assembled tried to figure out how to become a community. Sarah Chen had appointed herself unofficial liaison between humans and aliens, moving between groups with Thakkar's massive presence lending her authority she'd never possessed before. The war cat had quickly become something between bodyguard and counselor for the younger refugees, his patient demeanor calming fears that words couldn't touch. "Status report, Captain," Lyra said as Torres approached. "All passengers secured and adapting well. Dr. Yates from the medical bay reports that 17 individuals require ongoing treatment for malnutrition or abuse-related injuries, but nothing life-threatening." He paused. "Your Majesty, Earth Command has been asking questions about our passenger manifest." "What sort of questions?" "The kind that suggests they're worried about security screening. Several of our new citizens have skills that could be valuable or dangerous, depending on perspective." Lyra nodded. She'd expected this. "Such as?" "The Carathian triplets are expert system hackers. The Rosarian female Kess was a military engineer before her accident. The human soldier, Marcus Webb, served in special forces before his unit was betrayed and sold to cover someone else's war crimes. And the crystalline being? That's more complicated. The entity calls itself Nexus and claims to be a living computer program. It was enslaved as a processing unit for financial calculations. If true, its computational abilities exceed anything in Earth's current technology base." Through the observation window, Lyra could see some of their passengers working together to repair damage in one of the ship's cargo bays. Species barriers seemed to matter less when everyone shared the experience of having lost everything. "Your Majesty," Torres continued carefully, "Earth Command wants them quarantined upon arrival. Full psychological evaluation, background checks, loyalty assessments. The process could take months." "No, ma'am. They've been caged enough." Lyra turned from the window. Arranged temporary housing in the capital district, full civil rights, immediate citizenship processing. Anyone who wants to work can apply for positions. Anyone who wants to study can enter university programs. Their choice. "Your Majesty, the security implications?" "Captain," Lyra interrupted, "what do you see when you look at them?" Torres followed her gaze to where Webb was teaching alien younglings Earth card games, while Kess worked on repairs to a damaged maintenance drone. Sarah and Thakkar sat nearby, the girl reading aloud from a datapad, while the war cat listened with obvious concentration. "I see." Torres paused, his professional caution warring with what his eyes showed him. "I see people trying to build something new." "Exactly. And people building something new are people with investment in its success." A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The communications officer's voice carried urgency. "Your Majesty, priority message from the Hegemony Council. They're requesting immediate response." Lyra exchanged glances with Torres. "Put it through here." The lounge's main display activated, showing Ambassador Vex's reptilian features. But something had changed. His usual diplomatic composure had cracked, revealing genuine anger beneath. "Your Majesty," he began without preamble, "your actions have triggered a crisis across 7 sectors. 3 worlds have declared their intention to withdraw from hegemony trade agreements. Slave markets are in chaos. The Council demands you return the stolen property immediately." "I stole nothing," Lyra replied calmly. "I purchased goods legally offered for sale." "You know what you did." "These disruptions threaten economic stability for billions of beings. The Council has voted to impose trade sanctions against all human vessels unless—" The transmission cut off abruptly. For a moment, the display showed only static. Then a new voice filled the lounge, young, uncertain, but determined. "Your Majesty?" This is Sarah Chen. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. Nexus intercepted that transmission and traced it back through 17 relay points. Ambassador Vax was calling from a slave processing facility in the Outer Rim, not from any council chamber. The display shifted, showing shipping manifests, financial records, location data. Names and faces scrolled past. Thousands of beings bought, sold, transferred between facilities like inventory. Nexus's crystalline voice joined the communication. Query resolved. Ambassador Vex operates the largest slave trafficking network in this sector. The Hegemony Council exists as a legal fiction to legitimize his operations. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Show me everything. For the next 20 minutes, data flooded the screen. Transport schedules, auction records, financial transfers. The scope was staggering. Millions of beings processed through the system, their lives reduced to profit margins and shipping costs. But embedded in the data were other details. Resistance cells on a dozen worlds. Underground networks helping escaped slaves. Planets that had quietly stopped participating in the trade despite official policies. Marcus, Lyra called to the human soldier. What do you see in these records? Webb approached the display, his scarred face grim with recognition. A war, Your Majesty. It's been going on for years, but nobody wanted to call it that. The slavers on one side, freedom fighters on the other. Now you forced it into the open. Which means? It means neutrality just became impossible. Everyone has to pick a side. Sarah's voice came through the comm again. Your Majesty, we're receiving transmissions from resistance movements across the sector. They're asking if the offer of asylum extends to others. There are thousands of beings in hidden camps, escaped slaves who can't find safe harbor. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of history settling on her shoulders. When she'd bought 43 souls at an auction, she'd thought she was performing a simple act of mercy. Instead, she'd lit a fuse that reached across known space. Captain Torres, she said quietly, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're coming home with refugees, and we may not be the last ship to do so. Earth needs to prepare for the possibility of war. Yes, Your Majesty. Lyra looked around the lounge at the beings who'd chosen to trust her with their lives. They watched her with hope and determination, waiting for her to tell them what came next. Sarah, she said finally, send a response to those resistance movements. Tell them Earth's borders are open to anyone fleeing bondage. Tell them humanity stands with the free. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a storm breaks. Then Sarah's voice, steady and sure. Yes, Your Majesty. Right away. Through the observation windows, the stars seemed to burn brighter as new dawn carried its precious cargo toward home and an uncertain future. Earth appeared in the viewports like a blue-white jewel, but the homecoming Queen Lyra had envisioned transformed into something far more complex. Defense platforms surrounded the ship in geometric precision while patrol vessels maintained escort formation. The usual civilian traffic that marked humanity's homeworld had been conspicuously redirected. Your Majesty, Captain Torres reported, Earth Command is directing us to Military Docking Bay 7. Full quarantine protocols are in effect. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the nearest viewport, watching humanity's birth world grow larger. It's beautiful, she whispered to Thakkar, who rumbled agreement despite never having seen an ocean world before. Behind them, the 43 refugees gathered their few possessions and tried to prepare for whatever awaited them. The journey had forged them into something resembling a family species barriers, dissolved by shared experience and common purpose. Now they faced the possibility that their sanctuary might become another kind of cage. Your Majesty, Marcus Webb approached, his soldier's instincts clearly troubled. Those aren't standard escort patterns. Earth Command is treating us like a potential threat. Lyra nodded grimly. They're afraid. 43 unknowns arriving just as galactic politics explode into chaos. I can't blame them for being cautious. Nexus pulsed with agitated light patterns. Query? Earth Command has examined passenger manifest 17 times in past hour. Analysis suggests elevated security concerns beyond standard protocol. The communication system crackled to life. Royal Vessel New Dawn. This is Admiral Chen of Earth Defense Command. Your Majesty, we need to discuss your passengers before docking procedures begin. Lyra activated her private channel. Admiral Chen, what seems to be the problem? Ma'am, intelligence reports indicate that several of your guests have skills that could compromise Earth's security. We cannot allow unrestricted access to— Admiral, Lyra interrupted, her voice carrying royal authority. These people are refugees, not prisoners. They will receive the same rights and protections as any Earth citizen. Your Majesty, with all respect, the hegemony has demanded their return. They claim several individuals are wanted for serious crimes. If we harbor them, then we do what's right regardless of consequences. Lyra looked around at the beings who'd chosen to trust humanity with their lives. How long until Admiral Vex's fleet reaches Earth? Silence stretched across the channel before Torres answered. 8 hours, Your Majesty. 6 heavy cruisers and a command vessel. They're not coming to negotiate. The weight of decision pressed down on Lyra like gravity from a massive planet. Returning the refugees would preserve Earth's fragile peace but betray everything humanity claimed to represent. Protecting them might trigger the first interstellar war in human history. Chen stood beside Thakkar, her hand resting on the war cat's massive shoulder. Your Majesty, she said quietly, whatever happens, you gave us hope. That matters more than safety. Around the observation lounge, other voices joined hers. The Rosarian engineer Kess spoke through her translator. We knew the risks. We chose anyway. Marcus Webb nodded agreement. Some things are worth fighting for. Even the youngest refugees, the Carathian triplets who couldn't be more than children by any species standards, expressed their determination to stand firm. Lyra felt something shift inside her chest, a clarity she'd never experienced before. Admiral Chen, prepare Earth's defenses. We will not surrender refugees to their former captors under any circumstances. Your Majesty, Torres interjected. You're committing Earth to military action based on principle, Lyra finished. Captain, send the system-wide transmission. I want every ship, every station, every outpost to hear this. The communication array activated, broadcasting on all frequencies as New Dawn settled into its docking cradle. Across Earth's orbital infrastructure, work stopped as Queen Lyra's voice reached every human ear in the system. Citizens of Earth, humanity stands at a crossroads. Hours ago I freed 43 individuals from slavery at a galactic auction. They chose to trust us with their lives, to build new futures under human protection. Now their former captors demand we return them to bondage, threatening war if we refuse. The dock bay pressurized around New Dawn, as crowds gathered on every observation deck to watch history unfold. I will not surrender these people, Lyra continued, not to preserve our comfort, not to avoid conflict, not to maintain the status quo, because there comes a moment when neutrality becomes complicity, when silence becomes betrayal. That moment has arrived. Through the viewport, she could see news drones swarming the station, carrying her words across human space and beyond. Today Earth declares that freedom is not negotiable, that dignity is not for sale, that any being fleeing bondage will find sanctuary here, regardless of consequences. We do this not because it is easy, but because it is right. The transmission ended in silence that stretched across orbital space. Then, gradually, sounds began to filter through the ship's hull, crowds cheering, horns blaring, the noise of humanity choosing its path. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the comm system. Your Majesty, the hegemony fleet has just accelerated to full military speed. Estimated arrival now 6 hours. Earth Defense Command requests permission to implement war protocols. Lyra looked at the faces around her. Human and alien, young and old, scared and determined. Chen held Thakkar's massive paw in her small hands while Nexus pulsed with light patterns that somehow conveyed protective fury despite being a crystalline entity. Marcus Webb stood with the Carathian younglings, his scarred face gentle as he explained something in their native language. These 43 souls represented more than refugees. They were proof that different species could find common ground, that trust could bridge any gap, that freedom was universal. If humanity abandoned them now, it would abandon its own future among the stars. Permission granted, Admiral, Lyra said firmly. Full military alert. We protect our own. As alarms began to sound across Earth's defense grid, the refugees pressed closer to the viewports for their first look at the blue-white world that had chosen to stand with them against the darkness. In 6 hours, they would discover whether love of freedom was stronger than fear of war. The battle that would determine humanity's place among the stars was about to begin. Space around Earth erupted into choreographed chaos as the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect attack formation. 6 heavy cruisers and Ambassador Vex's command vessel arranged themselves in a sphere around humanity's home system, their weapons powered and targeting solutions already calculated. Queen Lyra stood in Earth Defense Command's main control center, watching tactical displays that showed humanity's defenders moving to intercept. 12 Earth cruisers, 43 destroyers, and nearly 100 fighters. Earth's entire active fleet against forces that had conquered worlds. Your Majesty, Admiral Chen reported. The hegemony vessels are demanding immediate communication. They want to discuss terms. Beside Lyra, Sarah Chen gripped Thakkar's fur with white knuckles. The war cat remained perfectly still, but his amber eyes tracked every movement on the tactical displays with professional interest. Around them, the other refugees watched their sanctuary prepare for battle. "Open the channel," Lyra commanded. Ambassador Vex's reptilian features filled the main screen, his diplomatic mask finally discarded to reveal the predator beneath. "Your Majesty, you have one final opportunity to avoid catastrophe. Return our property, pay reparations for economic disruption, and Earth will be forgiven this misunderstanding." "These people are not property," Lyra replied evenly. "They are free beings, under human protection." "Free?" Vex's laugh carried venom. "Look around you, human queen. Your entire fleet could not stand against one of our cruisers. Your planet's defenses are relics built for fighting yourselves. We offer mercy you do not deserve." Behind the ambassador, Lyra caught glimpses of his bridge crew, beings from a dozen species serving under alien flags. How many were volunteers? How many had simply learned that resistance was futile? "Admiral," she said quietly, "what are our odds?" "Honestly, 3-1 against survival. 5-1 against meaningful victory." Chen's voice remained professionally calm, but Lyra could hear the strain beneath. "Their ships are faster, better armed, and built for system conquest. Our only advantage is that we're fighting for home." Thakkar spoke for the first time since watching the enemy fleet arrive. "Numbers lie. Spirit tells truth." How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. When Sarah's translator rendered his words, the war cat continued. "I have seen strong armies break against weaker defenders who fought for love, and weak armies crush superior forces who fought for wages. Your primitive philosophy won't save you," Vex sneered, having heard the translation. "Last chance, Your Majesty. Surrender the stolen goods, or watch your world burn." Lyra felt the weight of billions of human lives pressing down on her shoulders. Every person on Earth, every colonist across human space depending on her decision. The safe choice was obvious. Return 43 beings to save humanity from annihilation. Then, Marcus Webb stepped forward, still bearing the scars from battles he'd fought for causes that had ultimately betrayed him. "Your Majesty, may I address the ambassador?" Lyra nodded. "Vex," Marcus said, his voice carrying soldier's authority. "My name is Marcus Webb, formerly of the 7th Airborne Rangers. You sold me and my entire unit to cover for war crimes you committed in the Outer Rim. But here's something you didn't count on." The scarred soldier gestured to his fellow refugees. "We remember everything. Bank records, transport schedules, communication logs. Every crime you've committed across known space. And we're not the only ones who escaped." Ambassador Vex's composure cracked slightly. "Empty threats from dead criminals. Nexus," Marcus called, and the crystalline being pulsed forward. "Show him what we found." The main display split, showing Vex's fleet alongside streams of data. Financial records detailing bribes to government officials, shipping manifests listing property by species and age, communication logs discussing processing efficiency and disposal of damaged goods. We transmitted copies to every resistance movement, every news organization, every government that's ever suspected what you really are, Marcus continued. Whether Earth survives or not, your network ends today. For the first time since the conversation began, Vex looked genuinely shaken. His empire depended on legitimacy, on the fiction that the hegemony represented lawful government rather than organized crime. Documentation proving otherwise would destabilize everything. You think truth matters, Vex hissed. When Earth is ash, who will remember your accusations? Everyone, Sarah Chen said, stepping beside Marcus. Because we're not the only refugees heading to human space. The tactical display updated, showing new contacts emerging from hyperspace across the system's outer edge. Dozens of ships, freighters, transports, even modified mining vessels, all broadcasting refugee registration codes. Admiral, one of the sensor operators called, we're detecting massive civilian traffic throughout the sector. Ships from 17 different species, all heading for Earth or human colonies. They're following Her Majesty's asylum declaration. Admiral Chen's eyes widened as the scope became clear. Your Majesty, the numbers. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of refugees, maybe millions. Lyra felt history pivoting around this moment. She'd triggered something far beyond her original intentions. A mass exodus of oppressed beings seeking freedom under human protection. If Earth fell now, the massacre would echo across the galaxy for generations. But if they somehow survived, if humanity could welcome these desperate souls and forge them into something new, they would fundamentally alter the balance of galactic power. Ambassador Vex, Lyra said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. You face a choice. Attack Earth and fight the largest refugee fleet in galactic history, or withdraw and face the consequences of your crimes becoming public knowledge. The reptilian diplomat's features contorted with rage. You think numbers matter? My fleet could destroy every refugee ship in this system before lunch. Maybe, Lyra agreed. But you'd be doing it in front of observers from 50 different worlds. Witnesses who would carry the story of hegemony brutality across known space. How long would your empire survive that kind of testimony? Silence stretched across the communication channel. On the tactical display, refugee ships continued arriving while Earth's defenders held position between them and the hegemony fleet. Finally, Vax spoke. You have bought yourself time, human queen, but this ends today. One way or another. All ships, prepare for bombardment. Target the planetary capital. The channel closed as hegemony vessels powered up their main guns. Admiral Chen turned to Lyra with grim determination. Your Majesty, we'll hold them as long as possible. Get to the bunkers. No, Lyra said firmly. We stay here. If Earth falls, these people need to see that their queen fell with them. Around her, 43 refugees who had gambled everything on human compassion, prepared to discover whether love was stronger than fear, whether hope could survive the fire of war. In minutes, they would have their answer. The first hegemony salvo lit up Earth's defensive screens like artificial aurora as massive energy beams struck planetary shields designed for asteroid deflection, not military bombardment. Across the control center, damage reports flooded in from orbital platforms absorbing hits meant for the surface below. Shields holding at 60%, Admiral Chen reported with professional calm that couldn't quite mask his concern. They're testing our defenses, looking for weak points. Queen Lyra watched the tactical display update in real time as Earth's fleet engaged the enemy vessels. Humanity's destroyers darted between the massive hegemony cruisers like insects harassing elephants, their weapons barely scratching the aliens' heavy armor. But they were buying time, forcing Vex's ships to engage defensive systems, rather than concentrate fire on the planet. Sarah Chen pressed closer to Thakkar, drawing comfort from the war cat's steady presence as explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum around them. How long can our ships hold out? She whispered. Long enough, Thakkar rumbled, though his amber eyes tracked the battle with warriors' understanding of what those numbers meant. Beside them, Marcus Webb coordinated with Nexus and the other refugees to monitor communication channels. The crystalline entity's data processing capabilities had proven invaluable for tracking hegemony fleet movements and coordinating Earth's defensive response. Your Majesty, Nexus reported, patterns of light pulsing across its surface. detecting massive hyperspace distortions throughout the system. Analysis suggests incoming vessels from multiple vectors. The tactical display erupted with new contacts as ships dropped out of hyperspace around Earth's outer planets. But these weren't more refugee vessels. These were warships bearing the insignia of species that had never shown friendship toward humanity. Admiral Chen's face went pale. "Ma'am, we're detecting Altarian battlecruisers, Zentari carrier groups, even some Karathian dreadnoughts. They're DS moving to intercept hegemony positions." Ambassador Vex's image appeared on the communication screen again, his reptilian features contorted with rage and bewilderment. "What is the meaning of this? The Altarians have trade agreements with—" His words cut off as an Altarian battle leader's harsh voice filled the channel. "Ambassador Vex, the Altarian Confederation hereby revokes all treaties with the hegemony. We stand with Earth and the refugee fleet." A new voice joined the transmission, melodious tones that marked Zentari nobility. "The Zentari Collective declares the hegemony's actions a crime against galactic civilization. We offer military support to Queen Lyra's humanitarian mission." One by one, representatives from a dozen species added their voices to the growing coalition. Some were major powers, others minor worlds with little military strength, but together, they represented something unprecedented. A spontaneous alliance built around the principle that freedom was worth defending. Sarah Chen stared at the display in wonder. "They're all here because of what we did? Because you saved us?" "No," Lyra said quietly, watching the Allied fleet take positions around Earth. "They're here because of what you represented. Proof that different species can work together. Evidence that the hegemony's empire isn't inevitable." Marcus Webb grinned fiercely at the developing tactical situation. Vex picked the wrong fight. Every species he's ever oppressed just showed up to settle accounts. The communication channel buzzed with activity as fleet commanders coordinated their approach. The hegemony vessels, suddenly outnumbered 3-1, began falling back toward the system's edge. "This is Admiral Chen to all Allied vessels," Earth's commander announced. "We move together. No one engages until we're in optimal formation." But Ambassador Vex wasn't finished. His command vessel, larger than Earth's biggest cruiser, powered through the Allied perimeter with weapons blazing. "If I cannot have the property, then no one will benefit from this chaos." Energy beams lanced toward the refugee ships clustered around Earth's outer moon. Civilian vessels with minimal shielding faced annihilation from weapons designed to crack planets. "All ships, emergency defensive pattern." Admiral Chen's orders crackled across every frequency. "Protect the civilians." Earth's destroyers threw themselves between the defenseless refugees and Vex's assault, their hulls glowing white-hot as they absorbed hits meant for unarmed transports. 3 vessels died in seconds, their crews vaporizing rather than let innocent beings face slaughter. But it wasn't enough. Vex's command ship was too powerful, its weapons too numerous. Refugee vessels began exploding as the ambassador's rage overwhelmed his tactical judgment. Then Thakkar did something unexpected. The massive war cat padded to the control center's communication station and spoke in his own language, ignoring the translator. Across the system, every Karathian vessel, including ships in the Allied fleet, stopped moving. The familiar amber-eyed species that had served as soldiers and workers throughout known space heard something in their ancient tongue that made them listen. Sarah's translator finally engaged. "Brothers and sisters of the warrior clans, this is Thakkar the Steadfast, veteran of 17 campaigns. The small ones around me chose to die rather than live in chains. Will you let cowards with big ships silence such courage?" The response was immediate. Karathian dreadnoughts, their hulls black as space and twice the size of hegemony cruisers, accelerated to ramming speed toward Vex's position. They were followed by Altarian battlecruisers, Zentari carriers, and every other Allied vessel in the system. The one-sided massacre became a rout as Ambassador Vex's fleet found itself surrounded by former victims and current enemies. His command ship, suddenly isolated as his other vessels fled toward hyperspace, faced the concentrated fire of an entire coalition. "Ambassador," Queen Lyra transmitted to the burning vessel, "this is your final opportunity to surrender. Your crew doesn't have to die for your crimes." Vex's reply came through static and emergency lighting. The hegemony will never. His transmission cut off as internal explosions tore through the command ship's hull. In space, there was no sound as the vessel that had enslaved millions broke apart in silence. Admiral Chen watched the debris field with military satisfaction. All hegemony vessels have fled the system or been destroyed. The refugee fleet reports minimal casualties, mostly thanks to our destroyer crews. Around the control center, beings from a dozen species embraced, wept, and celebrated survival. Sarah Chen hugged Thakkar so tightly that the massive warcat purred loud enough to vibrate the steel deck. Queen Lyra felt the weight of responsibility settling into something different, not lighter, but more shared. She was no longer the monarch who'd impulsively freed slaves at an auction. She was the queen who'd helped forge a new kind of alliance, built on principle rather than convenience. Your Majesty, Marcus Webb approached with data from Nexus's analysis. The intelligence we gathered from hegemony vessels shows the scale of their operation. Thousands of worlds involved in the slave trade, millions of beings held in bondage. This victory breaks their power structure, but it doesn't free everyone automatically. Lyra nodded. Then we have work to do. Sarah Chen looked up from Thakkar's embrace. Your Majesty, the refugee ships are asking for guidance. Where do they go now? How do they build new lives? Outside the command center's viewports, hundreds of vessels waited in Earth's orbital space. Beings from across the galaxy who'd bet everything on humanity's promise of freedom. They represented challenges and opportunities that would reshape human civilization. First, Lyra said, we welcome them home, all of them. Then we figure out together what kind of future we want to build. In the aftermath of humanity's first interstellar war, something unprecedented began to take shape around Earth. Not just a refugee camp, but the foundation of something new. A civilization built on choice rather than conquest, diversity rather than dominance. The girl who'd tried to save one old soldier had helped save them all.